I'm Iris Muller. I'm a certified rehabilitation counselor and a proud mom of 2 children, one of whom has quadriplegic cerebral palsy and is nonverbal.
And I'm Alma Schneider, a licensed clinical social worker and the proud mom of 4 children, one of whom has Prader-Willi syndrome.
In this podcast, we discuss the uncensored truth about raising kids with disabilities.
Prepare to laugh, cry, and hopefully learn something new. This is Two Moms, No Fluff.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Two Moms, No Fluff. I'm Alma Schneider, and I'm here with my partner, Iris Miller, and welcome to all of you.
Alma, today we are going to do something special. We are going to talk about a brand new film that we both have just watched yesterday at its online premiere, and the film is called Unseen. And this is a really special film about caregiving and how our society tends to forget parent caregivers and why it should be important for everybody else. The film is by Amanda and Tom Dyer, if I'm pronouncing the name correctly.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been an experience. So I'll let you kind of share your first reaction.
Yeah, so Iris and I have not discussed this film yet, and so we wanted to have a fresh episode for you guys. This was sort of an emergency episode we decided to do because we really wanted to discuss it, but we wanted to discuss it with all of you first. So I stumbled upon this film online. I was just on Facebook, and it was on a website called Medical Motherhood, and I saw the trailer and I was like, oh my God. And we watched the film, and I have to say that my first reaction was that I was very depressed when I started watching it. But I'm glad, because I want other people to see this film and to be overwhelmed with how overwhelming it is to be the parent caregiver or just a caregiver for someone who is in need, who has a disability and that requires all sorts of care, and to be on top of behaviors all day long that can be incredibly exhausting. So as hard as this film might be to watch, it also is going to serve as a catalyst, hopefully, for people to create change. And it cannot just be with the disability community, it needs to be with allies as well. So I'm very curious, Iris, to hear what you thought of the film.
Obviously, I felt the urgency to record an episode about it because it's so relevant. It just speaks to all of the topics that we spoke so far in this podcast. And it's just, this film is screaming the silent scream of so many parent caregivers. And it's just so needed and so important. I feel like the filmmakers really put a spotlight on this really hidden problem that people really don't want to face and see, because this is hard. This is hard, and I am grateful that they made the film, and I am really hoping that more people and more voices would come with. It's basically the same content that we have in this podcast, that parents of children in general, you get your firstborn baby and you're expected to swim in the pool of parenthood. But for parents of kids with disabilities, they're giving the baby, and it's like you have weights kind of attached to your body now, and you're supposed to just swim like everybody else in that same pool without anyone even caring if you're ever able to go up and get some air. It was really painful. And obviously I really felt connected to it on so many levels, also like my personal journey and what we are trying to do here in the podcast.
Yeah, I felt like the film could be one of our podcast episodes. I mean, it was truly reflecting everything that we talk about in our podcast. So we are very excited because we contacted the filmmakers, and we are going to be interviewing them a little bit later on this year to get their take on why they did this and how they did it and what they hope to come out of it. One of the things that I really liked about the film is that the people that were interviewed, you don't know what their kids' disabilities are, but everybody had the same story. and or similar stories about what it's like, and to feel, unseen. We're going to keep using that word, but it's that people in the community really have no idea what goes on behind closed doors, and how taxing, how exhausting it can be, and how isolating. And what I found so uh, what really resonated with me was how so many, pretty much all of the people who were interviewed, when asked, what do you want to share with society and the community? It's for people to ask, what can I do to help you? So what I really took away from the film was this awareness raising for society, that we number one, policy needs to change so that people are not so isolated, and can get the respite that they need, but also for just friends and family members and community members to not just say, oh, you're amazing, or God doesn't give you what you can't handle, or you're doing, I can't believe what you go through. We already know those things. We need help, and we need community. We need people to, we don't want people feeling sorry for us. Was people's, kind of the sentiment in it. It was more, we need help. And that means, the government, it means state funding, it means all of these things to provide the respite emotionally and practically, so that we can be successful with our families and be like everyone else
Yeah.
as much as possible.
Yeah, I have to say that in a way, I feel relieved being able to watch this film after accidentally, in the middle of the pandemic, our family moved to Michigan, where our daughter finally gets 24/7 care. And I can't even explain to people who haven't been in this space, what does it mean for us to be able to sleep at night for the first time in 13 and a half years. And one of the things that used to really, really upset me in the earlier years is that people would say, oh, she's a 10-year-old, but you need to care for her like a baby. And I would want to pull my own hair. It's like, no, it's not like taking care of a baby. It's 100 times harder than taking care of a baby. You don't understand. You underestimate the experience, the misery, the suffering by telling me that it's like taking care of a baby. A baby is so easy. So a lot of people don't really appreciate or understand. They never lived a day in our life. They don't understand the stress level. They don't understand what it means to live in that space of total sleep deprivation, that you're kind of like a shadow of the person you used to be, and what it means for your body function and your system. And people in the film touch about it. And the other kind of big impact that I think the film has is that it also speaks a little bit about how the system that is supposed to support families with children with disabilities is so so lacking. So many times, especially when we were in New Jersey and applying for services time after time, going to court, trying to kind of show them our situation, which was obviously very easy to convey. In Michigan, it didn't take any of that to receive the level of care that our daughter is getting. But in that journey, it felt like we were abused by the system, that we were reduced to kind of crawl on our knees begging, and no parents should go through that experience. And I'm sorry to say that I know of hundreds of other families, and as they say in the film, we're talking about 16.8 million families that are going through this every day in the United States. This is horrible.
Yeah, and they're not, they make a real point in the film, excuse me, of talking about how it's not the burden of the child, it's the burden from the system, that it's ableism that is not allowing us to be able to even take part in any joy, sometimes with the kids, because we need a break. And it's not the children's fault. It's the responsibility of society to be able to provide services so that children do not seem like a burden. They're not a burden. It's not their fault. They weren't born this way intentionally. It is the responsibility of the state to take care of the most vulnerable people. And that doesn't mean just the child. It means the family. It means the parents. It means the siblings. And there are not enough supports in there. And something else that I really love about the film is that they alternate between the families talking about how challenging it is with a licensed clinical social worker who talks about the families with whom she deals, and talks about how society does not allow for people to get the respite that they need, and health issues, psychological issues. And they it is post-traumatic stress disorder that parents have when they are dealing with these extraordinary situations at home that people truly have no idea what's going on for these families.
And this is one of the things I keep on saying. This podcast would never have happened if I was in the same state that I was a year ago, with the sleep deprivation and just trying to survive. And now that we have the podcast, one of the first things that really came after we started is that we really need to dedicate a lot of the efforts, not just to provide this conversation for parents, but to really engage in activism and to engage our listeners in activism, because there are so many things that need to change on a higher level. And I am not even talking about an effort on a state or national level. This is a multinational effort, because in so many states, there is still such a misunderstanding and lack of attention to the needs and like important needs of the caregivers and parents. And people also need to understand that if the caregiver is well, the quality of care that they can provide to the child with a disability is much better. If the parent is rested, well fed, and can think clearly, they're not totally stressed to the degree that they can't even kind of stop and reflect on what's going on in their life, then the quality of the child's rehabilitation, the child's outcome and well-being is going to be something completely different. This is an interest that we have as a society. And this is a separate topic, in my opinion, than caregiving for the elderly. People need to understand that the magnitude and the effect of caring for a child, this is not something that lasts a few years or a decade. This is a lifelong journey. And one of the most depressing things that the parents in the film are mentioning is that there is no light at the end of the tunnel. There is no end to this. The scariest concept for most parents is what happens when I die.
Right. So there's a fear throughout life. It's just a kind of the subtext at all times is, oh my God, nobody can do this but me, and I'm not going to be here forever. So it is a very frightening prospect. And again, the film is beautifully done. One of the things I really can appreciate about it at this time, when there's all this talk about Roe versus Wade, is that there's all this talk about making sure that all life is that we be pro-life. What is society doing to help these families once the baby is born? If there's a significant disability that requires constant 24/7 care, 365 days a year, what is the government doing? What is society doing to help these families with these babies that grow up to have tremendous needs? And we're seeing not much. So you cannot have one conversation without the other. And it's vital that we get on top of these conversations and change policy and make sure that all families are getting the support that they need to survive. Because it's really, we're talking about emotional and physical survival. A lot of these families were talking. There was one person in the film who said he had a heart attack at the age of 30. I mean, you don't hear about things like that. But you hear about them all the time in the disability community, because it is just not tenable to live like this.
Yes, and thank you so much for raising the situation. It just obviously for someone like myself who's really pro-choice, this also intertwines with this issue so closely, and really, obviously, this is a hard period to be in, because obviously a lot of people are very happy to say that they are pro-life, but they're against education, equal opportunity, accessibility, and inclusion of people with disabilities. And the families are really, I think that's an analogy analogy that I used in the sleep episode, that it's like having a baby and then expected to continue living without drinking. It can't happen. So
drinking water, not
drinking
alcohol.
water, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I don't drink alcohol, so it wasn't like a thought in my mind, but definitely thanks for the clarification. But it's just the expectation is unreasonable and so unfair. And the thing that I think we need to remember is that there are so many ways to help families that don't even have to deal specifically with the child with a disability. And people tend to think that this is a too complicated case, that they can't get involved as a community or as neighbors or a family in the life of a family, because who knows how to help them with the child who is so complex. But there's so many simple other ways that those families are aching for help. People mentioned in the film, help with getting meals on the table, help with cleaning their house, help with like the other siblings, and simple ways that our society can just change. Services are almost there, but not there for our families. We need to create, I think, an office that is dedicated for caregivers and an office that takes care of their needs and priorities. One of the examples that I mentioned to you before is that the expectation from my husband and myself to do so much caring and lifting for so many years with a kid that kept on growing and growing until it was impossible, with the hernias and the back pains and all of the muscles problems that we had. It's just, the parents also need physical therapy. It's not just the child with a disability. And the way that people are sometimes released out of the hospital after they were giving a horrible new diagnosis, and they don't have any mental capacity or emotional capacity at this point in time to deal with the heartbreaking news that they were just kind of dropped in their lap. They need help, and nobody pays attention to what is going on with the adult caregiver. It's just like, you deal with it.
Yeah, and it was presented really painfully in the film that, you know, the word unseen again. People don't know what to do when they see a child who's, you know, behaving erratically or tantruming or is, you know, has a physical disability that's significant. So parents not only don't smile, or people, you know, walking by don't smile, they literally look away. And so talk about, you know, one parent said it's not even about being invisible. It's worse than being invisible. It's somebody sees you and they can't even bear it, so they look away. Think about how painful that is for a family. So just, there are so many aspects of this film that just need to be seen, and awareness needs to be raised. So we're doing our part. We want you to see this film. And again, we're going to have them interviewed, and hopefully they will be in film festivals so that you can see the film, and online at some point. But anything else do you want to add, Iris?
Yeah, I think there one other piece to the film that is really, really important is the paid aides, caregiver, personal health assistant. This is something that they touch on in this film, but I want to also pay attention to that.
Yes.
As long as the paid caregivers are so underappreciated, and that there is no respect, both in the kind of ideological way to the work that they do, and in the financial way of paying them a decent compensation, we won't see a relief for families with children with disabilities, because nobody wants to work as an aide or caregiver when the stereotype is so kind of low. The actual training that they receive is almost non-existent, and the pay is so low. We need to make something to create a change that this industry and the population that works as caregivers are more appreciated in all of those arenas, and that we can get more longevity for the employees that are in this industry, and a normal compensation that a person can really make a living, something that they can really rent a house with and pay the groceries and bills for electricity and all that. And this is not the situation. And as long as this is the situation, parents are being left to fend for themselves because they can't hire help.
Right. Or they don't trust the help. They've had people come in and they leave, or they are damaging to the kids because they're doing things that are dangerous for the child because they're not properly trained. So parents kind of give up and say, I don't even want these people in my home because it's worse than having nobody because it's dangerous to the child. So all of these aspects are covered in the film, and it was so refreshing to see our lives represented in a film, because I've never seen it before. I don't know if you have, Iris, but this was the first time I've ever seen anything like this.
Yeah, so again, kudos to Amanda and Tom Dyer for making this film, and really the utmost respect for all the parents that are seen in this film.
Yes, we see you.
We see you and we hear you, and we share the joys and agony of this journey with all of you, and greatly appreciate the openness in which you shared your experiences in the film. It's been really an experience.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll be touching more on this when we have Amanda and Tom Dyer on the podcast. But until then, have a wonderful week, and we'll see you then.
For more information, please go to www.twomomsknowfluff.com. Thank you.
If you like this podcast, please subscribe and give it a 5-star rating so more people can hear it. Thank you.